Who was here for the last session, the one I did before, like in the morning? Raise the hands. Okay, about half of you. And then who was here for the one that Mark just did? I'm just trying to, okay, good. Great, so what we're going to do now is a little bit different. I focused a lot on the user interface elements of the actual Windows 8 devices and how all the different touch elements worked. And we're still going to talk about those, but what we're going to try and focus on over the next little bit here is designing for touch. So actually designing for a touch interface laptop or a touch device. I kind of disconnected that one so I could show you a couple things on that as well. And really that's kind of the agenda, is trying to show you why things are the way they are for touch. And I actually think it's a pretty critical topic. It's funny, I find a lot of these events people end up going to the developer tracks and things like that. The reality is that the development hasn't really changed too much. You can probably all learn the development, on your own. I mean, they're great sessions to go to, but the designing for touch is almost the most critical element of everything, as well as kind of knowing what you're designing for. So just because half of you weren't here, my name is Miguel Carrasco. I work for Imaginet in Winnipeg. We do a lot of high-end design for United Airlines, Halliburton, Sport Check. So I kind of work on the interactive team. I develop all the interfaces and user experiences. And lately we're working on United.com, so kind of redeveloping and redesigning some of the interfaces for them. So it's quite interesting. You can find me on Twitter at Miguel Carrasco. That's actually important. I'm actually live tweeting right now as we go. So if you follow my Twitter account, I'll be tweeting every kind of 10, 15 minutes so you can kind of get the snippets of kind of what I'm talking about today. At the same time, at the end, I'll be tweeting out a location where you can go and download all the details for this session, as well as the previous session, which is right on my Facebook. So if you want to go there now, you can actually take a sneak peek there. You don't have to be scared. It's a pretty public Facebook account. If you want, you can just subscribe. You don't have to add me as a friend, but if you want to add me as a friend, that's fine too. I'm not shy. You can always find me on miguelcarrasco.com. I also have a software blog, and I have a fitness blog as well. And then I have a user experience, digital marketing, social media, and just kind of a couple little things about me, but I won't spend too much time on that. Also, this session is very social, so we want to make sure you tweet a lot to Purely Imagine. Use Win8 if you can, as Win8 purelyimagine.ca as well, Purely Imagine on Facebook. We'd love to get your feedback on this stuff. This is design session 3. Obviously the best session, you're all here. There might not be a lot of you here, but you're all super engaged, right? Right? Okay, there we go. If you were here for the last one, you better engage, otherwise I'm going to make you do stuff. So this is design session 3. So what is that? Is that a mouse? Yes, that's a mouse. You're like, oh, wait a minute, is that a trick question? So that is a mouse. And the funny thing about a mouse is mice have changed over time slightly, but overall mice have been the same for a long time now, and everyone is used to using a mouse, right? So when it comes to mouse, when it comes to keyboard, everyone knows what they're doing with mouse and keyboard. But the problem is everything is shifting to these new devices, right? I'm going to give the camera guy a workout today. Good thing he's got a little remote control back there. But so this is a Surface device, and the way that this one works is touch, right? There is no keyboard, there is no mouse. I can dock this specific device. I have a docking station right here. So I can dock it in, and it detects when it's docked, and it has all these USB dongles on the side and whatnot. For the most part, this is a touch interface. As I flip it around, it actually detects that I'm flipping it, and it changes the screen. You'll notice that if I pick it up, these are the funny things that people don't notice, right? Someone was very dirty. That's not good. So if I pick this up with one hand, I'm going to use it very differently than if I would pick it up with this other hand. And we're going to talk about all these different things today because it's very important for your applications. There's a lot of apps that you probably use right now on iPads or whatever. But the reality is there's little intricacies that maybe aren't taken care of, and I want to make sure that you learn how to take care of them. Those are basically two silhouettes of people. And I kind of already did this exercise earlier, but I know half of you are new, so I'm going to do it again. Otherwise, it's a pretty boring slide deck. But the reality is that people know how to talk to one another. If I know that someone speaks English, I can talk to them in English, and we don't have any issues. But the problem comes in if someone speaks a different language than me. It's very hard to communicate. So how many of you speak a different language other than English? Raise your hands. OK, a couple of you. That's good. So on a count of 3, I want everybody to say thank you very much in your own language as loud as possible. And if it's not loud, we're going to have to do it again and again and again. So make sure you're loud. So on the count of 3, say thank you very much in your own language. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Muchas gracias. Okay, now on the count of 3, we're going to say it all in English. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much. So I apologize to those that already saw that, but it's the best way to make this point. And the reality is that if you build your applications in a different way other than what they're designed to be built for these devices, no one is going to know how to use your application. And they're going to have to relearn a new language. And what they're trying to do, what Microsoft's trying to do, is have the same language across all devices. So that would include your Xbox. That would include your Slate devices, your phone. Everything is going to have the exact same interface. So much so that even if you stand up in front of a Kinect, I have a 1-year-old boy. I had a video, and I forgot the transfer I was going to show you. And my 1-year-old knows to get up. You know, he can barely walk. He knows how to get up, and he starts doing this stuff with it. When I first noticed it, I wasn't sure what he was doing, but he was swiping. And now that he's learning vocabulary, he actually starts yelling at it. He says, Xbox, right? And it's hilarious. He's starting to know and learn the gestures. Now, the thing is, if we can carry over those exact same gestures, gesture recognitions on touch, gesture recognition with the Kinect, now we have an ecosystem where everyone can communicate and function effectively, right? Because the problem is not one person. The problem is when you're talking to millions of people that are downloading your app on the App Store. And as I mentioned earlier, there's over almost 700 million installs of Windows 7. A lot of them are going to upgrade to Windows 8. And your app is not going to be for one person. Your app is going to be developed for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that will ideally download your app. So when you build your app, you need to ensure that you adhere to the Windows 8 touch language principles. So I'm going to talk about a lot of principles. I'm not going to go into all the details, but just know that all of those principles were designed and developed by Microsoft and Microsoft Research, and they literally spent millions, if not billions of dollars on research, especially for these touch things. This wasn't someone, 3 people sometimes think, oh, well, you know, some guy at Microsoft thought this up. That's not true at all. They spent millions, if not billions of dollars researching all of these technologies. So I have every single one. If you go to that website right now, you'll see the last post I posted is every single link to all the different reference materials and all these things. So if you want to go and download a 600-page document on why it is the way it is, feel free to do so. So you can go ahead and do that. There's also a download link for like free Windows 8 trials and things like that there too. So the Windows 8 touch language, the whole idea is really to be able to learn the touch language once and then use it across not even multiple similar devices, but different devices. And give people that sense of confidence that if I'm going to go onto this tablet computer that I'm using right now, I know immediately how to get to the Metro home screen. I know immediately how to swipe. I know how to swipe different applications. And if I go over here and I pick up this thing, I'll know exactly what to do, right? That's the key here. That's the key. That's what breaks with every other platform I've used, including iOS. And that's what works really, really smoothly here. It's built to help you focus on what you do great at, right? We did an exercise in the previous session too, and I said this is the #1 tip. This is the #1 tip for you, is basically ensure that when you build an app, it does one thing really well, right? That's the #1 thing I could tell you. If you want your app to be at the top of the App Store, you're going to want to build your app to do one thing very, very well. So worry about those things. Don't worry about touch and mouse and keyboard. And use the built-in platform controls that come with Windows that we're going to talk a little bit about. So here's a nice one. Press and hold to learn. So this is a really nice way that's built into these devices where you can actually take the device, and I'll try and show you here a little bit, but you'll be able to see it on here as well. But this one's hooked up right now. So if we take the device, right, I can literally grab it. And so you almost didn't notice that, but if some of you have iPhones, I don't even care. Take out your iPhone if you can, and try and touch an icon on the screen. As soon as you touch it, nothing happens. Right? So a user that hasn't learned how to use an iPhone won't know what's going on. If I touch this screen right now, watch IE very, very closely. As soon as I touch it, it starts to move. And as soon as I touch it, it checks it off. So there's immediate feedback, immediate response to what I'm doing on the screen. I can grab it, right? I can grab it, and I can kind of drag it and move it around. And if I drag even further down, it kind of lets me drag it kind of wherever I want. I can scroll. I can put it down. I can even grab my other finger, and I can scroll with my other finger really quickly. Right? So it's very, very easy to use. And I can go back down. I can put it back. It's not a problem. So a lot of what they've built into Windows is this ability to press and hold and learn about something. Right? It's not about holding down for a few seconds, and we're going to talk about the problems with that. It's about that action of pressing something and holding it, or flicking something down. So you tap for the primary action. So when you tap on something, it will actually come up and load. But if you hold it down, nothing will happen. It'll just kind of wait there until you do something with it. That's important because that gives the user the ability to not necessarily be afraid to touch something, right? So that's kind of the paradigm that's broken right now with Android and iOS, is that as soon as you touch something with traditional touch devices, users are afraid to touch. Users are afraid to explore. With a mouse, right, you can hover over things and you can see what's going to happen. But as soon as you touch something, you can see it on websites that aren't optimized for touch. If you click on a menu up at the top, most websites break, right? You can't even get into the drop-down menus. So this is a very important, it might seem small, but this is very important with Windows 8. That's very different, if people are asking you, from other operating systems. This ability to actually explore the operating system and explore your applications. Again, you can override a lot of these things in your apps, so this is why I'm teaching you why they're set up the way that they are. The other thing is the ability to slide to pan, right? So I was kind of showing you a little bit of that, but the ability to, grab something and literally anywhere you go, you can swipe. So I can swipe with another hand if I want to. And also if I'm within an application like the weather app, right, this ability to just, flick the screen left and right, right? And I'm going to talk a little bit more about multi-touch and things like that as well in a few seconds here. But these are kind of the basic premises that build up the touch interfaces for Windows. Just go back here. Yeah, let's just go this way. So this swipe to select a command and move. And again, I kind of showed you a little bit of that. The other thing that you can do is you can actually, again, just flick on these items. And you'll notice as I flick multiple items, the context menu at the bottom of my screen changes as well. So depending on if I have one item or two items selected, the context change, right? So this specific application, the store, has the ability to allow me to make it larger than the screen. So if I hit larger, it'll actually enlarge it, so now it takes up 2 tiles. And again, I can select it again and make it smaller. Again, these are important because while you're building applications that might take advantage of these similar things, you're going to want to know what happens. And again, I can kind of drag, grab it, and just drop it down. Again, there's no waiting. It's very, very responsive, very easy to use. So this ability of selecting items just by flicking is one of the core elements that you're going to want to enable within your application as well. And again, you can multi-move items and things like that. Very, very powerful. And I kind of showed you already how to grab it and drag it and move it. Pinch, stretch, and zoom. Again, this 2-finger control. So this is one of the only times you'll actually have a 2-finger gesture as well as rotation for the Windows 8 devices, and I'll tell you why in a second. But this is a very natural thing, the pinch and zoom. And they're enabled on touchpads, as I mentioned earlier. So you can go ahead and pinch, and you can zoom items to make them larger or smaller. You can zoom in and zoom out. Even on this home screen, I can pinch and zoom. I can select an entire group of icons. I can name that group of icons very easily. Type in main, right? Name that one. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to name this group, right, as something else. I'm going to talk to something else, like utilities. I'm going to name another one. I can keep naming ones. I can call these, developer tools. Developer tools. And then once I go back in, again, I can just, Once I go back in, you'll notice that it's added main, and I have groupings, right? So I have developer tools over here. Yeah, very easy to use, pinch and zoom, very, very much a very simple gesture. But again, if you've ever had a device with multiple icons on it, it's very hard to move one from the other side. My son's always playing with my other device, and he's always moving my icons around, and then I have to go ahead and move them back. And it takes forever to move things side to side. This is a nice way of organizing things very, very well, very, very effectively. So pinch and zoom, and stretching. Turn to rotate. I'll show you an example of this. So again, you can just grab something, and with 2 fingers, you can rotate it. So like a game, like a puzzle game or whatnot, you can rotate them very easily. You can rotate and enlarge at the same time as well. And again, it's a very natural gesture that most people would do. If I had a piece of paper, I would do the exact same thing with the piece of paper. And again, these things will also work on Connect, right? Again, swiping, zooming, turning controls, all of these things work as well, very well, with the Connect device. The swiping from the edge, again, you implement these in your own applications. So just swiping from the edge down, go back here. If I swipe up, I get different context menus. So on your applications as well, you'll have these. Depending on what I'm doing, I'll get different menu items at the bottom. So I'm going to just swipe that down. I get specific options for IE, right? And again, in your applications, you'll have these same things. So let's go into one of these apps. Let's go into the Internet Explorer app. And I'm just going to go into, let's go to The Verge. I love The Verge. Who reads The Verge, by the way? Awesome. I love reading it. And very, very Metro-y look. Or sorry, modern UI look. So it looks really cool. So again, at the bottom, I have the toolbar. Kind of lets me, no Chrome at all. If you saw my last presentation all about Chrome, there's no Chrome on here. It's just the content. And you can explore it, and it's a very, very nice interface to use. If I want to just flick down on the top, I can kind of see different tabs, The Verge, Portal Login. If I want to add additional websites at the bottom, I can just click in. Any of my frequents are there. Again, notice that I can do the left and right. Again, these are very little things, but when you build applications and you flip up and you build a layer of items on the side, make sure that you enable all of these things we were talking about, right? Left and right, flip. Because people get used to all these things, and they don't want to go into an app that doesn't do this. They'll feel that it's broken. They'll start trying to swipe it, and they'll be like, why doesn't it let me do that? Right? So this works very, very well. You can go to Twitter, you can go wherever you want. You can create new tabs, whatnot. Swipe down. For settings, from our last session, right? Swipe from the right, go to settings, settings for the Internet Explorer options, whatnot, permissions, and all that. So incredibly intuitive. Again, incredibly important to ensure that you kind of build your applications that way. And again, I'm just going to swipe from the left side here. So a bunch of different ways you can swipe. And again, with the mouse, I'm going to show you those in a few seconds, you can access all of these things with your mouse as well. So again, very, very cool. I'm going to show you a couple of cool apps with Bing News, Bing Sports, show you some stuff with maps, and then I'm going to show you Puzzle Touch as well. Let's go into those. And so if I just go into News, again, I apologize for some of you that were in the last session, but some of you weren't, so I'm just going to go through this quickly. So again, this application now, I'm not in the home menu of Windows, right? I'm in an application now. But again, everything functions the same way. I can left and right scroll, flick up from the bottom, flick down, right side's my settings. For the application, I have options. I can click in on one of the heading options. Again, I talked about the typography and the font sizes. So by default, I know that I can click in on these items. Right? I can select different options. I can highlight text by just one finger. I can expand that text using 2 fingers. Right? I can expand more text, or I can go back. Right? Very, very easy. I can click on, see if this works here, this selection here. Go to, let's say, share this. I could share with whatever clients he has installed here. And go back. I can flip over. Very, very easy to use this interface. As well, I can go to search. Right? I can search right within this application. I can say I want to search this on Wikipedia if I want to. I'll pull up more information on Wikipedia. So again, a very, very neat interface to use from that perspective. We look at stocks. Load this up. So the stocks apps I really like. It's a nice kind of look and feel for an application with different things. You can look at the year. You can click in on different options. You look at the Microsoft stock. Nice trend lately. You can click in wherever you want. Again, articles appear tiled. And a lot of people asked me in the last session, well, how can I differentiate my application if I've got to stick with the confines of the app? You can, by all means, you can customize certain things, right? But overall, this is a customized app, but you can tell it's pretty much branded to the Microsoft look and feel, which is very, very nice. And again, if I swipe up, these menus you can customize. So some of them look pretty boring, but this one's actually a little bit nicer. It's a little bit wider, right? So on your own applications, you can make them wider. You can put whatever icons you want in there. You can still do drop-downs, right? Drop-down list. You can set things up in there. You can still do these things. You can set up news items. So a lot of really cool things you can do in there. Let's go back to the home screen. I'm going to show you the puzzle app. So again, notice I'm swiping to hit search. The other thing you can do, and I kind of showed that already earlier, is you can just type. So you can just type puzzle. It comes up with the application. Super easy, super fast to use. People that miss the start button on the desktop mode, I always just tell them hit window key and then start typing. Right? You can pretty much find anything almost immediately. You don't even need the start button anymore. So if you go through here, I can select, let's say, one of these puzzles. I am not good at puzzles, by the way, so this might be painful. I'm just not going to do it. So I can grab it, right? I can move them around. And most apps that I've seen do this, but not all the apps that I've seen, let you do this, kind of rotate the puzzle. Okay, this is too hard to do on the screen, but I can rotate the puzzle. The screen's all wobbly. And then I can just kind of drag them. At the same time, I know why that did that, actually. If you got to select challenging or difficult, right? Because otherwise, it kind of thinks you're, there we go. Okay, I'm actually getting scared. My heart is actually going higher because these things freak me out. Because my son always asks me to help him, and I have no idea. So I can zoom, move these around. I can grab multiples at the same time. So I'm using 2 fingers here, grabbing 2 different puzzles. And I can just kind of rotate them, right? So again, very easy to kind of move. I'm actually pretty excited to see what they do with the Pixel Sense technology with Surface devices in the future, where maybe they'll allow multiple points of touch on a screen. I think that'll be really cool. But just really neat to kind of see all the different gestures that you can use with Windows. So if you haven't had a chance to play with it, you can come up after, and I'll definitely let you try it out. I'm just going to swipe back to the zoom. Oh, and the last one I was going to show you, which is really cool, is the maps. So let me just go maps. Load up maps. And yep. So hopefully this picks up where we are. It'll zoom in. It should in a second. If not, I can always just swipe in from the side here and just say Toronto. And it'll just zoom into Toronto. And again, I can just click in here. I can zoom in. You get some really cool animations as well if you turn on different options. I can swipe down, see add a pin, show traffic, map style, directions, choose map style. I want to see aerial view, switch over. Again, I'm literally doing this with one hand, right? I mean, it's very powerful. You can't do this with any other device other than laptops that run Windows 8. Even Apple doesn't have anything like this yet. So again, very, very cool. I can flip through. It's really smooth interface. And then again, if I grab this device, I can easily kind of do it myself. So it's incredibly powerful. You can just keep zooming in or whatever you want to do. Here's a different aerial view. Right now I'm using 2-finger pinch, right? 2 fingers, swiping around. It's funny because Microsoft's been doing stuff like this for years already, and then Apple gets up and does this demo, and it's a map app that doesn't even work. And everyone's like, wow, that's amazing. And I don't know. It's not that amazing, really. But it's cool, right? So again, cool things you can do with technology. There's just so many things. I'm so excited to see what people do with this, especially with deep zoom and things like that. I'm going to go back to desktop and go back to my slides. So leveraging the tough language, right? So why does it say tough language? I should say touch language. Like, why does it say that? I blame you guys probably weren't at the SharePoint conference, but Scott Guthrie was doing some demos at the SharePoint conference. You guys all know who Scott Gu is? No? You guys don't know who Scott Gu is? He's like the developer of Microsoft. But anyway, he always wears a red shirt. He was doing this demo, and his demos kept crashing. And they were doing demos of using Dreamweaver to build SharePoint applications. And so he just kept blaming Dreamweaver. And then the guy presenting after him wasn't even doing a Dreamweaver demo. And he said, oh, it must be Dreamweaver. And so it was quite funny. So I'm blaming someone else for this. But anyway, using the touch language can be inspired by it, right? Like, try and use it and play around with it. Like, I seriously, if you've never used a Windows 8 device and you're planning on building an app, you're going to have a tough time because it's not like your traditional app. And if your headspace is at, well, Android and Apple, right, and you just are building an application, you're not going to have such great results because the touch actually works, I think, a lot better in the Windows 8 environment. So you're not going to leverage any of the things that I'm talking to you about if you haven't experienced it fully yourself. And again, if you can use one of the Slate devices, you can use one of the other devices, you can use a phone device. And you guys are lucky. I live in Winnipeg. You guys live in Toronto. Microsoft has a campus here. You can go down there. You can try out the devices. I mean, it's just amazing. You guys have a great opportunity right now to really kind of jump on this stuff. So touch truths. So I want to talk a little bit about anatomy, ergonomics, and kind of some of the interaction points, which are quite important to note. Again, I go into more detail on these on those posts on the Facebook wall there. But I'm going to kind of try and go through touch is sloppy, touch or no touch, sliding and tapping, and multi-simultaneous input points. So I kind of talked about this already, and this kind of graph kind of explains it a little bit better. But depending on what you're doing, right, if you're lying down in bed, right, at a hotel room or something, and you just want to watch a movie, chances are you don't want to, grab, this kind of clunky thing and put it in there or do something like that. Or even with an iPad, you don't want to put on that cover and try and stand it up. It'll just fall over, right? So maybe you grab a pillow and you just kind of throw it there. So you're going to use the interface in a different way. You're going to maybe just watch it and then maybe just swipe at it. So there's different ways that you're going to use the device. In that case, you're going to maybe flick from the top down a little bit. In the case of sitting down on a plane or sitting down on a chair, right, you're going to hold it this way and you're going to start typing on it like you would almost like a keyboard. So there, you're going to be a little more effective at typing, a lot quicker typing. But in terms of swiping and touching the screen, you're not going to have that capability. If you pick it up and hold it with 2 fingers, you might be able to type quicker with the special keyboard they have. But again, you might not. It'll be really hard to reach the center points of the screen. So you're going to have to end up switching to this mode. So the reason that's important, and the last one there, if you're holding it this way, maybe reading a book, right, you're not going to have much access with this thumb at all, but this hand is free to use. Now, the reason that's important is you have to look at these 4 core elements when you're designing your application. What's your app all about? Is it a painting application, right? Is it a game that you're playing? Or is it a typing Word application that you're going to kind of put on your lap? Or is it a movie app like Netflix, right? And you really need to look at all of those elements when you're designing your application because it matters a lot. It matters a lot. If you're building a Netflix app and the person is supposed to be using it sitting down and typing, it's going to be a complete failure. At the same time, if you build an app that's like Word, but you have to use it standing up, it's not going to work very well. So again, you really need to look at kind of the different areas. So just to show you some of the different research that Microsoft has done in terms of interaction areas, you can look on the left side there. If you're holding the screen like this, right, the best areas to type, it's almost reversed, are in the white spots, right? So that's where people are going to be typing and swiping. That's where you want to put all your elements for your application. In terms of readability, right in the middle is probably the best readability, but it's not so easy to click stuff. And at the top, you kind of have OK because you have to do something like this, right? So again, if you're building your app, try and layer, in generally speaking, I try and tell people to layer their other icons here or on the left and right. And also, I always tell them to be careful about the right side because that's where people start swiping to get the different controls and charms. So I usually try and leave, just make sure you go with the Visual Studio best practices and kind of leave that space for the swiping from left and right and top and bottom. Then if you have a phone or if you're moving it in this method, right, again, it's very different. Now you got interaction points right in the middle of the screen, again, depending on how you're holding it. And again, there's certain areas that won't be able to be used for control elements. One of the cool things I found just over the evolution of different touch applications has been gaming. Originally, when a lot of game apps were released for touch devices, you saw a lot of the controls were on the screen, right? You had like the joysticks and all that. And the recent games that my son plays on his device, you can kind of see when he's playing them, there's no controls anymore. They kind of just assume that this is like up and down, left and right, and here you got like 2 different touch points, right? You don't even need to have the controls layered out on the screen, right? So these things keep evolving, and so this is kind of just the best practice areas right now. And again, all this stuff's available on those screens or the Facebook page there that I was talking to you about. So a couple of different touch patterns that we should look at: direct manipulation, visual feedback, targeting, semantic zoom, and then solving occlusion, right? So we'll talk a little bit about that. So direct manipulation. So again, immediate feedback. I showed you this already. And really not having any kind of invisible threshold. And I have a screen that's going to show you a little bit more about that. Having learnable interaction points and reinforcing the content over Chrome. I believe that's the next slide. So what do I mean by that? So not having something with direct manipulation, if I touch the screen and I kind of swipe that circle over, pretend I swipe that over, right? There's kind of an invisible threshold here that if I have to pass this line, right, then something will happen. There's a lot of devices that do this. The problem with that is that people don't necessarily want to go all the way over. They might just go a little bit. So you need to kind of be aware of kind of what they're going to do. So ideally, what you would do is you would grab this and kind of just swipe it wherever you want, maybe just a little bit. And it's not so much about the zone, it's more about letting go. So that's what Microsoft tries to do. So let me explain that a little bit further. So if I click this icon and I'm moving it around, right, I can move it. But if I let it go anywhere that I don't want it, it'll just go back to the exact same spot. Whereas in other devices, I literally have to hold down for like a couple of seconds, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, and then drag it off of the screen and then let it go again to put it in place. At the same time, while you're doing that, a bunch of animations are going on at the same time, and it makes it fairly confusing. So they've tried to solve that kind of with the way that it works in Windows 8. You can also, actually this is an important topic. If you notice on a Windows machine, right, I can't use like 2 fingers to do something different or 3 fingers to do something different. iPads do that a lot, right? If you use 3 fingers, you get a specific gesture. If you use 4, you get a specific gesture. Even on their OS X operating system, they have all these different gestures going on. And the problem with all of that is that if you were to do that, people need to know this. They don't know by default to do that, so they need to learn all these things. This doesn't do that. If you use 2 fingers, it's just zoom in or zoom out. That's about the only one that there is. But if I use 3 fingers or 4 fingers, nothing's going to happen. It's just zoom in and zoom out. It makes it very easy for people to learn. They've done extensive research on this, and you can download all those white papers. And really, if you use 1 or 2, that's about it. The 3rd finger doesn't matter, right? Because what ends up happening is people will rest their hands on the device, and they'll put 3 fingers on it, and they'll accidentally cause actions to occur. And things can get deleted, you can get moved from different areas. So it's not an ideal mechanism for direct manipulation. So what we try and do is use 1 or 2 fingers. That's it. The 3rd finger could be a resting area. So directly manipulating items. So really, I've been showing this a little bit. You can grab things. You can tile them on top of each other if you wanted to within your apps, and then moving them around. Again, this is kind of the idea of grabbing one icon or 2 icons. And again, using the mouse, you can again do the exact same things. I could right-click 2 items if I wanted to. But again, as soon as I grab another one, it's going to only take the icon that I'm grabbing. It's not going to take 2. So just different things you can do. You can clear the selection. You can delete the grouping of apps. You can unpin them from the start menu. I'm not going to unpin these because he's probably going to wonder where they went. So just a couple of different controls that you can do. And again, it works with touch. It works with the mouse as well. There we go. Direct manipulation. So trying to keep interactions untimed. I've talked about this a little bit already. The issue with this is that if it's too fast, people end up doing it by accident, so you kind of have to let it wait for a little bit of time. So you have to wait about 3 or 4 seconds. And if it's too slow, it becomes inefficient because people have to hold for a while in order to get something to happen. So basically, there is no usage of anything timed within the operating system that you're going to be developing. So as you build applications for Windows, don't ever implement anything where it's a timed kind of reaction point. Trying to keep items reversible. I'm not going to demo this, but basically that's grabbing the icon, holding it, and if you let it go, it'll just drop back in place where it was, allowing people to discover and look at different things within your application. And it really makes it really, really safe for users to explore the application and kind of gain additional confidence while they're using your app. So really, there's 3 kind of immediate feedback points that you're going to get. And there's no real invisible threshold. Interactions are completely reversible. Allow any number of fingers, and interactions are basically untimed. Those are kind of the core elements that I kind of want to touch on in the last core area that we talked about. So I think that seems pretty clear. And really what it does is it makes touch easy to learn and safe to explore. As I mentioned, these allow for impression of sloppiness. I talked a little bit earlier about the finger, and I'll talk a little bit more now. But basically, touch is sloppy, right? It's not an exact science. It's not a direct manipulation as you get with the mouse. So that's very important. And then just having everything be fast and fluid with the interaction points. So I want to talk a little bit about targeting, smart targeting, target sizes, and scrubbing. So if you lift up, a lot of people say that they have fat thumbs or fat fingers. Can everybody lift up their index finger a little bit? So look around the room at everybody's finger. Now this is kind of odd. Okay, but you all basically, unfortunately, have pretty much the same size little index finger. Everyone says, I have fat thumbs or whatever. Yeah, but for the most part, people don't use the thumbs. And at the same time, if you actually look at the pressure where it actually ends up going onto the screen, for the most part, it's the exact same thing. Now, if you have like extended fingernails or whatever, if you're a lady, I mean, that's a little bit different. But for the most part, everyone has pretty much the same size, unless you're comparing a baby to a basketball player. And even then, it's not that much different. So I wanted to kind of show you a little bit about that. And the reason that's important is, although Microsoft pays attention to that while you're building your apps, at the same time, your apps, when you throw things onto the applications, you have to ensure that, that you take advantage of this stuff, and I'll show you why. So there are rules for this. There are rules in terms of percentages. So if you look at it from a targeting perspective, from 3 millimeters all the way down to 13, you'll notice that the ideal point is in the middle at 7. So for the most part, what you want to do is you kind of want to target that sweet spot. That's where you're going to pretty much capture everybody. And this means how big you make your buttons. At the same time, it also means where you space things. Because if you space things too small, people might accidentally touch the wrong button, and then you're going to have huge issues, especially if you're writing a banking application where it's a yes to continue or cancel that $10,000 transaction. So these things can actually take into account a huge thing. So the recommended minimum size is basically right in the middle at 7. And you can kind of extend a little bit to the left or right. Basically, a baby's finger would be about 5, and a basketball player would be at about an 11. And actually, here's a slide for that. You can kind of see baby's finger. It's not even 5, it's like 8. Average finger size, and then a basketball finger size. So you can kind of see, like, most of you don't have fingers that size anyway. So for the most part, the whole thing of fat fingers doesn't really exist. So I'm sure a lot of you said that in the past, but it doesn't exist. So in terms of targeting minimum sizes, if you look here, it's about 40 pixels in size. Again, the pixels depends. That's why they use the measurement, because the pixels depends on the size of the screen. So this is the whole point of modern UI, is to extend across larger displays and smaller displays. So again, just depending, you're going to kind of see here, and you can kind of see a little bit of a consensus. But just to give you an idea, if you were to build an application, forget about all those stats. If you were to build an application that has like a favorites, where you kind of slide left and right on a favorite bar, you can put those elements pretty close together, and it won't really matter too much, because you want them to be close together, make them large enough so that you can scan and rate your application from a 0 to a 5. But at the same time, if you're writing an application, with money involved, like give presenter $100, you want to be able to hit cancel. But again, I blew it up for the screen size, but if you had these small and you accidentally clicked here, you don't want it to accidentally do something. So that's kind of the best visual I could give you, just to ensure that you kind of keep the right spacing. About 5 is kind of the right space. So again, I would probably redesign that and kind of put the spacing a little bit further apart. And this is important because I've actually noticed a lot of traditional application developers putting their buttons fairly close together, because the OK cancel were generally put together. In fact, they used to you drop them and they kind of come together as one. With touch, it's very, very different. Another thing that I find incredibly interesting is, for the most part, any device that you use that's touch is, and I get this question a lot from people that are left-handed, is most people, how many people are left-handed? 1, 2, 3, 4. How many people are right-handed? Yeah. Sorry, left-handed people, you're in trouble for the next 10 years. Basically, most devices, you can download things and you can set things up certain ways, but for the most part, people that are writing applications are not going to worry too much about left-handed users, so that's kind of unfortunate. I've seen some apps that handle it pretty well, but for the most part, the things are going to be developed for right-handed people. So just in general, just ensure that you place the elements on the right side for right-handed people. And then I always feel funny, like I'm insulting left-handed people right now. My wife's left-handed, but again, just try and develop for the right-handed people. And then left-handed people, whatever, they can build their own devices, I guess. I figure if they come beat me up after, you guys all got my back. There's more of you, so. Although the left-handed look a little more tough than the other ones, so I don't know if that was a good call. But so mouse, keyboard, and pen. So the thing is, you want to really design for touch. That's the most important element when you're building a modern UI. But at the same time, you do have to. What time is it, by the way? I just want to make sure. 3:15? OK. What time is it supposed to be over? Oh, we'll have lots of time. I'll be done in 15 minutes, probably. So we'll have mouse, keyboard, and pen is kind of a secondary form to touch. So in terms of touch, when you look at a touch device, always worry about touch first. That's the most important part. But at the same time, sometimes people will dock them, right? And then they're going to use keyboard and mouse. So you do have to look at keyboard and mouse, as well as pen support. Because a lot of the pen devices, one of the really cool things, I don't know if you know this, they demoed it at Build almost a year ago now, is the new, I don't know if the Win Pro will have this yet, but they've actually built 2 display types into the new Surface devices. So what does that mean? A lot of times when you're using a pen device, and you grab the pen device and you start writing on the screen, it starts detecting your hand on it. So it actually breaks and it doesn't work very well, which is why the iPad, even if you buy a really good pen, as soon as you put your hand on, it kind of starts messing up. So what they've actually developed is 2 screens into the Surface Pro. And don't quote me on that. I'm not sure if they're releasing it with Surface Pro, but it's coming. I've seen it at Microsoft Research. And basically what it does is it has 2 devices. So as soon as you touch the pen, it detects the proximity of the pen to the device, and it turns off the touch device, the touch screen. So what that means, it allows you to write notes very well. You can kind of move your hand on the screen, and you get really, really nice input across the device. So pen might not be too important right now. You don't see a lot of pen stuff. But I think once that's out, you're going to see a huge shift in pen. The other thing with the pen is I don't remember how many touch points, but they've also built it so if you angle it, it's basically a Wacom board. If you used a Wacom board before, you'll be able to use these devices for Wacom type things as well. So quite exciting. So mouse, keyboard, and pen, very, very important. Again, design and build for touch. That is predominantly what people will be using these devices for. And then they like to say get the mouse and keyboard for free. I like to say get the mouse and keyboard for free as long as you do certain things. Because if you don't do certain things, you're going to run into some issues, and your users will not be too happy with you. And so what this means is that the mouse, if I add the mouse in, right, the mouse should kind of work as expected, right? So if I go ahead and click in here, you'll notice that, let's say I'm just using mouse keyboard, I don't have touch. As soon as I touch my mouse, it automatically adds a scroll bar at the bottom, so I know that I can scroll left and right. At the same time, if I come close enough to the top left corner, I can see that there's ability to swap between applications. If I scroll down a bit, I can see all my applications. I can select the application I want. If I go even further down to, I'm in presenter view, sorry. If I scroll down even further left, I can kind of see my start menu come up. And then if I go to the top right corner or right left corner, these little charms will come up as well. So bottom right kind of gives you the overlay. If I go here, it kind of gives you the entire full layout, and top right kind of gives you the overlay again. And again, these things are important, and the reason I'm showing you that is because when you build your applications, you need to know that those elements will be there. So let me go into an application and show you what I mean. If I go into weather, I can go down to the bottom right corner. I can go to settings. I can choose the options for my weather, right? If I right-click, right-clicking, and this makes sense. People are like, right-click? I didn't know that. And I think they're just not mind-shifting, because a right-click, traditionally, if you go Windows 7 right now, a right-click gives you your options, contextual options. This is exactly what this is, right? A right-click gives you the contextual option from the top and the bottom, right? So right-click any application, and your menus come up. So again, when you're building applications, right-click brings in your menus. Again, I can switch this very easily to Fahrenheit if I want to. And I can right-click it again, and Celsius. And a little known fact, when this first came out at Build, the first thing I noticed that they didn't have Celsius. So I actually filled in a feedback form, and I said, hey, you guys don't have Celsius on your device. They sent me an email and said, thanks, we're going to put it in whatever next build. So I don't know if I was the only one that submitted it, but I like to say that I invented Celsius for Surface. So it's fantastic. So it's really cool. So again, right-click brings in your menus, and the hover, top left, bottom right. Again, important, because don't ever go throwing a button in the bottom left corner of any application in Metro, or Modern UI, because otherwise you're gonna run into some issues. So again, just so all you do is you swipe from the top corner, top of the screen, yeah, or bottom of the screen. That's basically what it is. Great question. And we're going to have time for lots of questions, so that's really good. I saw this presented at Build a few weeks ago, almost a month ago now, I guess. And yeah, there was pretty much about 20 minutes of questions, so that's great. And then everyone can listen to them. So yeah, very important. And also ensuring that you get that interaction feedback with the mouse so that you know things are occurring. So again, if I go ahead and right-click on things, right, it didn't just not do anything. It actually added a checkbox, and it also popped in the menu. So again, remember these things when you're building your applications, that things happen. If I click in, again, right-click, brings them up, brings it back down. Okay? So important points there. Some of the basic mouse things, we kind of already went over them. The hover and learn works again. So if you have a mouse and you're hovering, you can actually learn the application by hovering. Little menus come up. So again, when you're building your apps, don't forget about the labels, because the labels will be used when you hover over with a mouse. The right-click, ensuring you have items that make sense when someone right-clicks. Moving the cursor into the corners, again, just make sure that you're being careful, that you know what they do. They show you the running apps. They show you the charms. Using the scroll wheel, this is actually a big one, is on a mouse, especially these new mice that are coming out, which are like touch mice. It's very easy for people to accidentally hit the scroll. So I always recommend just ensure you leave it as default. Don't try and use the scroll in a mouse to do specific things. And use the UI buttons for semantic zooming. So you basically hold the control to zoom in and zoom out. Most of you have probably used that in the past, so that works very easy. At the same time, if you detect a mouse movement on a map application, say, you might want to pop in like a zoom in and zoom out thing on the side so people know that you can actually zoom in and zoom out on your app. So again, it very much depends on what kind of app you're building, but you can kind of see that adding a mouse actually does affect the behavior of your user interface. Keyboard is huge, and it's really important for a lot of people that are, they call them enthusiasts. These are people that like to hack their computers and a lot of them, system administrators, things like that. Power users is the word I like to use. Power users really like to use a keyboard because they feel they're way more productive when a keyboard, and that is actually true, is you are more productive once you add the keyboard. So just make sure that you can navigate with the keyboard as well. So I can pretty much do, like I can pan through items with my keyboard. I don't have to use a mouse. I can use the different shortcut elements to do different things. I can move things around. I can move the screen around however I want. There's a lot of different shortcuts that I'm not going to have time to show you, but a lot of really cool elements. So just make sure that you're developing. There's a document on the website there that'll show you all the different shortcut keys that users can use within your application. It doesn't mean you have to implement them, but it's pretty much a good idea to know what they are. And include shortcut tips and tool tips as well. So if you want people to learn what those shortcut keys are, just ensure that you kind of add them in so people know how to use them. Just some of the really basic ones. There's a ton. These are just some of them. The Win key pretty much does everything. Win P lets you select what monitor you want to present on. Win C charms, Win Z to show the different app commands. You can control plus, control minus for semantic zooming. So a lot of different elements that you can do with the keyboard and the mouse are still predominant within the operating system, so it's very important. With the pen, I unfortunately don't have a pen here, but basically by default, the pen behaves exactly like a mouse would behave. So if your application isn't a drawing application, you'll just want to kind of leave it alone, and it'll behave like a mouse. So touch is already kind of set up for you. If you want to add additional functionality, and I think this will be more important in the future, then you'll want to code to that, and there are a lot of pen and stylus options available to you. Again, the nice thing with pen is that Microsoft's been working on pen for almost 10 years. Like, it was almost 10 years ago, and people say Apple invented the iPad. No, almost 10 years ago, Bill Gates stood up and kind of showed that device, and he had a pen and all that kind of stuff. So they've been working on pen support for a long time. So the pen recognition is actually amazing, especially on tablet devices. I used to have one like 5 years ago, and the pen recognition was amazing. I only stopped using it a lot of the times because there was no real touch need to use it, and I found I could type faster. So I think pen's going to come back in a big way in the next year, so just something to be aware of. And actually, before I recap, one other cool app I wanted to show you that kind of works really well with pen, which I actually don't have with me, but I'll show you the app anyway. If I can find it here. It's called FreshPaint. How many of you use FreshPaint? A couple people. FreshPaint's awesome because it's a really beautiful application that allows you to do a couple of cool things. So I'm just going to choose a brush. There's different brush elements I can select. I'm going to choose a color. I like blue. And then I'm going to go ahead and go over here. And then I'm going to paint. And it literally detects, like, I'm moving my finger, and it's detecting the angles that I'm doing with my finger. It's not just a really boring kind of application that doesn't let you do that. I can go a little bit lighter, or I can go like a little bit thicker. And it really allows you, to draw different things. I'm not an amazing artist or anything by any means, so I'm not even going to try and do anything fancy here. But you can do a lot of really cool things with this app. So I can choose this. I think in the future, especially once they release the ability to have like pen and the touch separate, I think you're going to see a lot more uses for this. I wouldn't be surprised if Wacom just goes to this mechanism in the future, even for their new devices that they have that actually have screens on them as well. I can create new things. I can take a picture of a camera. I can import options. I can choose different surfaces. I can choose different paper that I might want to use. It's kind of hard to see on the screen there probably, but I can choose a different background color. And it's just really, again, a really pretty application. And this is actually another good example of an application that is very different than the grid layout. So for those that want to be creative, you can definitely be creative. But again, the top makes sense. This app would get approved into the App Store because the top makes sense. If you look, I swiped in with my finger, right? And I didn't just get those boring menus. What I actually got was, I actually got the actual layout to let me select colors and canvas. But at the very top, you still have the back, the tools, and the surface. At the very bottom, I have this nice stylized screen, but I also have the camera, the import. So I'm technically still adhering to the Microsoft design principles, while at the same time developing this beautiful canvas to design things in and edit. And I'm really excited about this. People were talking about AutoCAD applications and Paint applications and Photoshop applications. I think in the future you're going to see apps, and I think there already is one for Photoshop, where you'll just be able to draw on a canvas, and then you'll still have your full photo editing capabilities within the actual desktop mode. So just a lot of really cool things that are coming in the future. I'm quite excited about. So just to recap really quickly. So design for touch, optimize for touch. That's the number one thing I could tell you is worry about touch, mouse worry about second, and keyboard worry about, I would say, pretty much third. The reality is modern UI is really built, for touch, and that's the most important thing because for the most part, people when they buy a modern UI screen, they're using those elements. If they're using a keyboard and a mouse, they're in productivity mode, as I like to call it. In productivity mode, you're basically going to be using keyboard and mouse. You're probably in the old applications and creating and designing things in there. Some of the resources that you can use, again, they're all listed here. They're all hyperlinks, so I pasted them onto the Facebook wall there, so you can go ahead and download them. Session evaluations are super important for us to track which sessions you like the best. If you didn't like the session, you obviously like me anyway, so give me a nice rating. Well, that's okay. If you hated me, that's fine. Just tell me and I'll cry. But again, I had to leave that on. I had to leave that on the screen for a few seconds. That was a mandatory requirement, so I had to say something. Session evals, w8pi.ca, designer 3 eval. Please fill those in. I love to read them. I read every single one of them. If you have any questions, I'll get them. They're anonymous, so I won't actually be able to respond to you directly, but I will be posting everything on my website. Again, get all the resources and references at facebook.com/Miguel Carrasco, or go back to the Imagine event website as well later on to download. Does anyone have any questions, Q&A? No? I have one question. Yeah, go ahead. Oh yeah, absolutely. They're listed in there. If you go to my Facebook wall, you'll see them. There's different ones. There's UX guidelines for depending on what mode you're in, pen support, mouse support. Like they're really detailed. If you actually want to walk through them, there's a ton of stuff in there. There's also guidelines if you want to get accepted into the App Store that you need to adhere to as well. Anything else? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, similar but very different. If you watch the build 2011, maybe I'll post it on my Facebook wall as well if you guys want to watch it. It's an old video now, so it's kind of hard to find. It's on Channel 9, but the build 2011 sessions, they actually did the demo, the full demo of the pen device working. It just wasn't released for RT. But it lets you like angularly do things, and it's really, really cool. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. So if you have text area on your app, you want to type it. But on the surface, with that keyboard, text area. The keyboard takes up half the screen. Right. So sure. Put your text area at the top, or I think you'll see those slide up. So you just slide up those spaces. Yeah. Yeah, so if you're typing on a screen, like, so the question was, like, what do you, and again, confirm me if I'm wrong, but if you go in here, let's say I'm in Internet Explorer, and I'm typing, like, where does the keyboard actually fly in, and what happens to the items behind the screen? So that's a great question, and Internet Explorer does this very well because they run into this all the time, which is why I pulled it up. There's a lot of apps that I've used that, here, I'll give you a different example. Like, let's say I'm going to type in here at the top. In this case, it works because the text area is at the top, but if you're developing an app, I've seen a lot of apps that have the two different text boxes, and when the keyboard comes up, it hides the text boxes. So in coding, I'm not a programmer, but you can actually code it so that it won't do that, so that it'll move your screen up and allow you to type in your username and password as an example while looking at the elements. So in this case, the other way you can do it without moving it up is what Internet Explorer does, which is basically when you click in, it actually gives you the input area on top of the keyboard. So you could either do that option, so username password could be up here, or you could leave it on the screen you're at and then just kind of move the screen up. Does that answer your question? So right here, yeah. So I'm trying to move it down lower, but yeah, like what would happen in IE is it handles it well, so I can keep typing. But I've seen a lot. Exactly. Yeah, you get the basic keyboard, but again, IE will detect it. So if this was lower, it would detect and scroll the screen up. But I've seen a lot of apps that don't do that. They just, if someone's typing and the keyboard flies in, it doesn't move the screen at all, and then you get covered up, and it's really, really bad UI. I've seen it a lot on Windows Phone apps, actually. So make sure you take advantage of that. It's built in if you use it. It won't do it by default. Right. Yes, absolutely. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And if it's a web app, it'll just work. Any other questions? Great, guys. Well, thanks so much. Hopefully you guys tweeted. And please fill out your evals. I'd really appreciate them. Thanks for good seeing you guys.